Now, after seeing all the AWS storage concepts, I wanted to add a little practicality to it and show you, I got away from the individual things, and instead of saying, well, we're going to talk about this, this, and this, I was like, again, I'm going to try and cram as much into this session as I can on how to work with S3, EBS, and Glacier. So I just left it nice and generic as stuff, and there will be a lot of little sub points under each one of those. So without wasting any time, let's get started with the AWS Management Console and shoot down here to the S3, Scalable Storage in the Cloud. And by default, when you get in here, it's a very simple interface. You just have the yellow box and then this buckets area. Now, you may have a template bucket in here by default. You can delete it or rename it or whatever you want to do. I'm going to go in and create a bucket, and we'll name it. Let me show you this. I'm going to do temp bucket. Notice we have our region. Where do you want this bucket at? I'll just use US standard and hit create. Now I'm going to get an error message, I figured, because it says that bucket is not available. The bucket namespace, here's the key, the bucket namespace is shared by all users of the system. Wow. That means your bucket has to be unique from everybody else's bucket in the U.S. standard. That's the Pacific region, or it might be Virginia. I'm not. Again, they have it in their documentation of where the standard region is at. But you have to make sure that your bucket name is unique among all the people that are sitting in that region. Now, why? What's the point? Well, we're going to find out that Amazon will create and generate a URL for you that allows you to access that bucket. It kind of goes into that hosting model. Access that bucket from wherever you are at. And that URL looks something like tempbucket.pacific.s3.aws. I mean, it's just a big old long URL. But what they allow you to do, and I'll explain this more in a little bit, is create a CNAME record so that you're able to come in and generate kind of an alias for that. Because, I mean, you don't want to be like, hey, come check out my new website, man. Just go to tempbucket.s3.aws.amazon. I mean, people, what? So you're going to want to create a CNAME, a DNS CNAME that says, you know what, come to my website at tempbucket.com. It's awesome. And that's all people know. But behind the scenes, that actually uses S3. So it kind of ties into that. So we need to make this unique, is the point. So I'm going to add CBT to that. Let's see if that's create. Yep, if that's create, that's unique. So we have our first bucket here. Now, what is a bucket? Think of it like a hard drive partition. So on your computer, you've got your C drive, your D drive, all these different partitions. So a bucket is just kind of an isolated partition of folders and files. Now, you can see right here that I've got the bucket created, and then they actually have, believe it or not, this is a new feature. Before recently, I'll say the last few years, you had to go find a utility to actually put stuff in your bucket. You couldn't do it directly from the web interface. You can see there's still even like, an enhanced uploader that lets you upload a whole folder at a time. But this allows you to, throw whatever you want in that bucket. I'll click on Add Files. I'm looking at my, this is the kind of stuff Jeremy downloads. Be safe. Elmo safe installation picture. So hey, let's throw them in there. Let's throw the Chrome installation in there. Okay, please. There it goes. Chrome installation. Say wow, Chrome installation is very small. I'll click on Start Upload. I'm just gonna, if I want to install Chrome, I'll be able to put that in my bucket. Let's see what else. And the reason I'm showing you this is it really gives you an idea of like, hey, I can put anything in my bucket. This really is a hard drive in the sky. Let's throw a Windows activation update in there, along with the Elmo face and Be Safe and the safe installation. All these are just images, JPEG images. So I can click, add a few of them and do a start upload. Now, only difference with that enhanced uploader, which maybe will be out of beta by the time you use this, is you can just actually choose a whole folder and upload the whole folder at once. So cancer. So you can see I'm starting to get stuff in my bucket here. Now I can also go in and create folders. I can say I want a folder called images. Hit enter. I'm gonna let's right click on this guy, and I'm gonna make a copy of him and paste it right here into paste into my images folder, and now I've created a copy of that safe installation. Now it's sitting in here. Just here's some bonus information for you. Not too sure if this really interesting for me, but did you know that that folder doesn't exist? So Amazon uses a structure. It's more of a database structure than it is an actual file system to handle the S3 information. So what you actually did behind the scenes when you created an images folder and put a file in there is you just made a copy of that file. So now there's actually two files in this big flat file structure, big flat database at Amazon that you now have one called safeinstallation.jpg and one called images/safeinstallation.jpg. So it's all one big flat file structure. Now why is that interesting? Well, the reason it's interesting is the search mechanisms at Amazon don't have to look inside of folders, which would slow it down. It doesn't have this hierarchical file system, which would take a long time to index and slow it down and all that. They just say it's one big flat system. Yes, we make it look pretty for you and hide things in these quote-unquote folders, but really it's a big flat file system that just kind of uses, think of it like aliases to represent folders. So anyway, kind of interesting stuff. So now we have some stuff in our folder. So let's move now into the permission side of things. If I want to go in here and say, let's close this transfers. I'm going to right click on this guy and go to properties, or you can go up here, click properties. It brings up this little window. It shows, hey, this is your little safe installation bucket that we've created for you. There's a nice friendly link that you're able to use to access it. We've got the permissions. Now, since I'm the one, my AWS account uploaded this, it shows that I'm the one that has the open, download, view, and edit permissions for this. Now, some files will need open/download because you literally, like for instance, an image, you have to download the whole image to be able to see it, whereas others might take view permissions, like I can view a text file remotely. What I would suggest is just granting, if you want to make it publicly accessible, do both. Go in and say, I want to allow open and download and view to, hit the drop down, and we'll say, and there's our options, everyone, which is the internet. So if you're making a website, that's what you want to do. Authenticated users means anyone that has an AWS account will be able to access this. Log delivery. This is if you want Amazon AWS to write log files to your S3 bucket, it does it with this kind of mysterious user called the log delivery user. So we need to grant, if maybe we have a folder in S3 that stores log files, we need to grant that user edit or write permissions to that bucket. And then we have me, which is just a quick alias for whatever user I am logged in as. And then we have Jeremy, which is my actual AWS user account. So for now, I'm just going to say everyone has open/download and view permissions to this file. Now, also realize that I have the ability to right-click on this bucket as a whole and say I want to set the permissions for this entire bucket to, and you can see, do you want to be able to have people able to list the items in this bucket, upload and delete them, view permissions, edit permission. I mean, you can go through and edit that, as well as dive into bucket policies. Now, bucket policies I am not going to cover in this series. I would say that is an advanced AWS topic when we create an expansion or an advanced AWS series, because, and I mean, if you sit there and tinker with them, you'll figure them out. But it really is kind of it's like its own little cryptic language for how you can grant permissions kind of on a bulk basis. So I can say everybody has this, and it gives you a lot more flexible permissions than just the open, the view, that kind of thing. I mean, this is where you're able to say, oh, I want to allow people to create their own buckets and that kind of thing. So bucket policies are pretty big. So for now, we're just using the simple versions. So I want to come in here and say, okay, let me look at this website side of things. So here is that URL that I was talking about. It says, do you want to turn this into a static website hosted entirely out of Amazon S3? And I'm going to say, yeah, sure. Now, I'm going to be forced to specify an index. Now, what an index is the initial document that it's going to open when somebody comes here. So we might as well did it. I did I granted people permissions to safe installation.jpg. So let's save that. That is our new index for our new website. Right there. Beautiful. So this is this is the index document. Excuse me, the first document that opens up. Also notice if I say, hey, I wanna look at that be safe. I kind of know what I'm looking for here. Be safe.jpg. Bam. Access denied. You are forbidden. Refresh, refresh, refresh. Every request ID gets a little hash that's putting in there. It's like you are being logged. You are smacked down. So the reason why is because we have not granted permissions to the be safe. So I'm going to go to that guy. Hit the property. Actually, I'm right there. Be permissions. I'm going to click on add permissions. And I'm going to say everyone, open, download, view permissions. Let's click on save. And I'll come back here and do a refresh. Whew. We've got our be safe document that's now displayed. So you can see how these permissions work and they play out. You're getting the feel for how S3 works. It's really my goal in this practical nugget is to just take away the what factor. When you get in there, like what's going on. So you get kind of a taste of what it's like to work with S3. As in everything, there's a lot of other directions we could take. But for now, let's jump into EBS stuff. So I'm back at the AWS Management Console because I want to show you that there is no EBS section. There's S3, but EBS is actually a subsection of EC2 because there's no other place to use EBS other than with EC2 instances. So I'm going to go in there. And you can see that I have one running instance right now. It's actually just a quick test instance that I spun up based on, I think it's Linux is the foundation. I chose the micro size instance because the default for that is using EBS rather than ephemeral. Now, that then leads me to say, okay, well, and I think I chose, well, I don't remember what the default size was. That's dictated by the AMI that generated this instance. But I'm going to drop down here to the Elastic Block Store, click on Volumes, and you can see right there that there's the volume that was spun up by the individual instance that's running right now. Now, as I look across this, I see, okay, well, there's the volume, there's the capacity. I can click on it, see a little more information about it. I can see which device it's attached to. Now, one thing if I don't think I've mentioned this at this point in the series, Amazon uses its own little auto-generated world of names. So they're going to say, well, it's actually instance 368.198.03. It's like that is not user-friendly. Sometimes they will say, oh, by the way, that's named test machine because that's what I named it. Sometimes they won't. Now, by time you're hearing this, who knows? Amazon is making changes daily to this to make it easier to use, friendlier to use. So maybe someday you'll never even see these anymore. Maybe it'll all be just friendly names that you choose, and behind the scenes, Amazon calls it vol1a da 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 da. So this is the name of the volume. It was saying it was actually generated from the snapshot such and such. So all these things we're going to define momentarily. So let's dive a little bit into this. First off, I want to show. Now I generated this instance, which based on the AMI that I chose, and by the way, all I did was hit launch instance, classic wizard, continue, and just stuck with this one. So I know now when I select the default and just move through on the default with micro and everything, it's going to be an 8 GB EBS based storage on based off of the AMI such and such. So let's say I'm running this Linux instance and I need a little more permanent storage space. I'm going to go to the volumes here for the Elastic Block Store. I'm going to create a volume. And this is where I have all of my options. Now, I can create this volume right there, based off of a standard image, which means you're just going to get essentially the performance. Amazon says normal EBS, standard EBS, is going to get the performance of about a 7200 RPM hard disk, like your normal computer running at home. That's going to be EBS. Or I can say, well, I want provisioned IOPS. Now, you can't, although it would be fun, you can't go in and say, oh, I want, and go to the drop down, I want 4,000 IOPS, this screaming machine, and I want it 1 GB in size. If you try to create something like that, it's going to be like, maximum ratio of 10 to 1. So that means if you're going to do 4,000 IOPS, then you're going to have what 400 gigabytes is the minimum size of drive that you're going to create. So you're going to pay a pretty penny for that to keep that in there. So let's go provisioned, right? I'm going to drop down and let's do the lowest so it costs me the least. So if I have a 10-to-1 ratio on that, that'll be a 20 gigabyte EBS volume. It is tied to an availability zone. Remember, EBS does not transcend availability zone, so I'm going to need to choose which data center my instance in Oregon, you can see that's my region right now, is running in. And then, do you want to base this EBS 20 gigabyte volume off of a snapshot that's already there? Now, at the top of this list, you'll see some of the snapshots that you've created, and then as you go down, it's just like brrrr. It's just this big gobbledygook of mush, which is, these are all the snapshots, or many of the snapshots, I shouldn't say all, that Amazon uses when they generate their instance. So if I wanted a CentOS 5. Now, honestly, I have never used one of these. I'll use the AMI itself rather than grabbing the volume, but you can actually grab. So this would be like stealing the hard drive out of one of the AMIs that are used to automatically generate Amazon machines. Now, I'll come back to that snapshot in just a moment, but I'm going to hit create, and sure enough, now I've got this 20 gigabyte EBS volume that is available for me to use in this region. Now, wasn't based on a snapshot. I can see this is a provisioned IOPS. I have 200 IOPS. Now, one of the things that'll drive you crazy is you see this name and it's empty, and you'll click on it and it's just like loading. Please wait. Like you can't. You're like, oh, plus sign. I wonder if I can click on that and do something. It's like a filter list. You can't do it. The way you actually change the name is you go to the tags for that volume, and you can see there's no tags right there. But if I click on add/edit, bring it up, you can see the first name in there is, or I should say the first tag, first key is name. And you can click on this little link right here, and they'll give you all kinds of tags that can help you describe your volumes or do different things that you can search on. It's a whole nother topic. So I'll just say this is my, let's say, fast disk, because it's provisioned IOPS, right? So I'll click on Save Tag for the name. And now you can see that the name shows up over here, which is really helpful when you're trying to find that EBS volume in the future. Maybe you've got 100 EBS volumes you're trying to search through. What is that? So now I might say, okay, well, maybe I want to add that to my little Linux instance. All I've got to do is right-click on that guy and hit Attach the Volume. And it'll come up and say, well, oh, don't... wrong. After all that, I didn't even notice. I'm in the wrong. Well, I did that as a full demonstration that if you create your instance in an availability zone that you have your EBS volume in, it's not going to work. So I'm going to trash that guy. So I also wanted to show you how to. Okay, I'll give up. I mistakenly created it in the wrong availability zone. So let's add another one. All right, create a volume. I'll go provisioned IOPS. Let's go, what was I, 20 gigs? Because I was using provisioned IOPS of 200. This time I'm going to throw it in West 2B. To be or not to be. There we go. There we go. Now I can right click on it, hit attach volume, and it says, aha, there's my test machine that's running. What do you want to mount it as? And so inside of Linux, it sees volumes, or it's not a C drive and a D drive. It sees these little essentially a folder is what it sees it as. So I click on yes, attach, and now poof. That was it. Amazing. My instance now has this immediate 20 gigabyte provisioned IOPS EBS volume that it's able to use. Now let's go further. Let's say I do whatever I do to that volume. Let's say I'm in that Linux instance and I install different things to that. I create this perfect image of an EBS volume, and I'm like, man, I want all. Maybe I install Apache, whatever. You customize your instance in such a way that you're like, this is now my template. I'm going to generate multiple virtual machines from this. All you've got to do now is right-click that guy. Now this is one way of going about it, and create a snapshot. Now also keep in mind that you can create a snapshot of any thing in this EC2 world. So I could snapshot the entire AMI. I could say, you know what, this Linux instance is my new template. Like, you guys know that, right? But if I just want to snapshot a volume of that, I can do that too. And let's just say this is my Linux template volume. Blah, blah, whatever. Well, I don't know if those semicolons will throw it off. Blah, blah. I got to spell blah right. So click on create. And now behind the scenes, what it's doing is creating a snapshot. Now, where is that at? It is in S3, but an area of S3 that I'm not there. Like if I go to S3, let me jump back here, shoot over to S3. Now I actually went in and deleted all the buckets from before. So it's like, do you want to create a bucket? So I click on create a bucket. It's like I just walked into S3 because I deleted all the buckets that I had that I just used previously on that last demo. So it's an area of S3 that only EC2 volumes can access. So now I've got this snapshot. So I can say, okay, well, maybe next time so remember this ID. I just remember the last 4 digits, or EDCB, EDCB, EDCB. So I can go into volumes, and I'll create a volume, new EBS volume, and I can say, well, I want this EBS volume now to be, standard. You can do provisioned IOPS or whatever, and I want it based off of, look at that, our template, our Linux template that we created before. Now it's got my description there, not the actual name. So now I can generate a 100 gigabyte volume, or whatever size I specify, based on that snapshot. And now I've got a new EBS volume that is available for me to attach to whatever Linux instance, I'll say any instance I want to, but essentially Linux is going to be able to read that file system and then use it. So we've got these essentially hard disks that we can just bam, 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 provision and attach to our virtual machines. And there's multiple ways of doing this. I could have gone in as I'm generating a new instance, and I can say, okay, well, I want to launch another instance. Going through my little wizard. And then I go, okay, hold the phone, my drive configuration. I've got my root drive there. I want to go in there and say I want to add an EBS volume based on, you see how that is right there, right? And now I can add that in, and now I'm essentially creating these little Linux instances that have all of the correct file system and structure that I want. So a couple ways that you can go about it. That's the idea of working with EBS stuff. All right, the last one we're going to get into is Glacier. And this one's the toughest one to demonstrate in my mind. Simply because Glacier in itself is a very short demonstration. I mean, you're going to see there's nothing to it, and that is where all the confusion comes in. People hear about Glacier all over the place. They're like, a penny a gig? Seriously, that's amazing pricing. I'm going to use that. Then they get in here to try and get started, and they're like, I don't get it. And they abandon the cause. So what I'm going to do is, I'm at risk of going outside of what we're here to talk about, which is practical AWS storage. I'm going to go a little beyond it into some topics we will cover later on in the series in more breadth. But for now, I'm going to give you the flyby on them. So let me first off, I'll show you what it looks like to create a storage place in Glacier. It's actually called a vault. Back in AWS Management Console, you can see there's our S3, there's our EC2. That's where we've been. Right above S3 is Glacier. Now I'm in Oregon is my region, and I don't have any Glacier vaults. Now this is what we use to describe our storage spots. And what a descriptive word. It is like this big container. Now you can put multiple things, multiple backups, if you will, in that container, but the vault really describes a security boundary. So you can say somebody has access to that vault, and they can have access to everything inside of it. So I'm going to create my first vault, and we'll call it CBT Vault. How's that? And you can see I can continue notifications or create vault now. So I'll hit create vault now. It's creating. The little man in the golf cart's driving around, grabbing a new tape drive, jamming it into place. Come on, go, little man. And I will tell you, you get the feel. It's not always this way, but you get the feel when dealing with Glacier. It's just, sometimes it just feels slow. Maybe it's just mental because you're dealing with a product called Glacier, right? And there it is. We now have a backup storage spot in the cloud. And this is where most people fall off the bandwagon. They're like, okay, I want this penny a gig storage. So I created it. Okay, so so can I right click on this? Is there like an upload thing here? Okay, no, and that's it. I mean, click around all you want, my friend. All you can do is create another vault, delete that vault, or kind of bounce between these two tabs. That's all there is to it because Glacier relies on 2 other things. And probably even more than that. So what we did was we literally did create that storage vault in the cloud called CBT Vault. Now, in order to grant access to that vault, I have to implore another Amazon piece called IAM. Now, in order to actually put things into that vault, I need to implore some kind of program that has the ability to work with Amazon access methods. Glacier, I'm stumbling because I'm like, how far can I go? Glacier uses the same kind of REST API access methods as S3. So what that means is, for instance, when you create your first S3 bucket, now just fairly recently, Amazon, well, I won't say recently, but when S3 was first released, it was very similar to Glacier. You would create a bucket and people would stare at it and say, okay, now how do I get files in it? And there would be a whole documentation known as the REST API. And REST API calls are very well known to the development community. And by the way, if you're not a programmer, I went to college for computer science, and I loathed it, and I swore I would never program again. And here I am talking to you about APIs. Application Programming Interface allows you to write code that interfaces with, in this case, Glacier or a Vault or an S3 bucket. And Amazon relies on the RESTful API or REST API to do that. So for instance, I'll just pull this over here. Here is an example of dealing with Amazon S3 using the REST API, and this is just an example. It says example of a delete operation. So in order to delete a file from Amazon S3, your application actually has to say, okay, you're going to go delete this file. Here's the request. Here's the host that you're going to go to. Here is the authorization that you're going to use to say that I have permissions to delete that file. So there has to be a program written that allows you to make deposits into that vault, to make withdrawals and withdrawal calls from that vault and interface with that. Now, those are people that have created the REST API interface for an end user. Now, keep in mind, and this is where people are shocked at first, because they look at Amazon. They're like, well, Amazon, why didn't you make a little utility to do that? And Amazon will say, well, that's not our business. Our business is to create storage in the cloud and tell you how you can interface with it. We'll let all kinds of third parties, and believe me, there are a lot of third parties out there that have gone out to do that. So, okay, that tells us, that eliminates this mysterious, like, okay, I've got this vault. What do I do? How do I get to it? Well, we're going to need to use a program that uses this REST API or RESTful API calls into that vault to essentially interact with it. And we say, okay, got that. So the REST API is a component. Well, how do I assign permissions? Because the REST API is going to say, okay, here's a file I want to add to that vault. Well, how do you assign permissions? Well, that's where IAM comes into place. REST API will use an account, or I'll say the credentials from an account in IAM to do that. Let's create one. Now, if it feels like I'm going a little faster, this I kind of am, because we're getting into stuff that I'm going to talk about later. I don't want to go in all the depth, but IAM, right over here, Identity and Access Management, allows you to define the user accounts that have access to resources in AWS. That's the whole goal of this. Now, right now, I have no groups, no users in this region, so I'm going to go create a user. Now, normally you would, best practice is create a group and add all the permissions to the group, and then add the users to that group because it's more scalable. But in this flyby demonstration, let's create a new user. I'm going to go CBT user. Is going to be the username. Now notice, this is huge. Generate an access key for each user. Notice the note. It says users need access keys to make secure REST or query protocol requests to AWS Service API. So yes, we need those access keys. So when I do that, it says, okay, I've created this first user. What's his credentials? Golden. You need to put those down somewhere. You will not be able to get them back if you lose them. Now, don't worry. You can create, if you have a master account to AWS, you can add, generate new access keys, but you don't want to have to keep doing that, especially if people are hard coding these in applications and things like that. So I've got my access key here. Let's just put this next to it. I'll say access key and the secret access key. Right there. Think of that like a username and password, right? For the RESTful API. So I'm going to close that window. It says, warning, you haven't downloaded this, because you can download them to a CSV file and things like that. I'll say, nope, I got them. I'm good. I copy and pasted them. So now I've got that one user. Notice from here on out, I can see the access key, but I'll never be able to get to that secret access key again. It just says that's the access key. I don't know what the secret is. I can delete it, or I can make it inactive, or add another access key for that user account, but that first set of keys is lost if I haven't backed it up. Now, just creating a user account doesn't do anything unless I grant it some credentials, or unless I shouldn't say credentials, unless I grant it some permissions to resources. So I can click on permissions and say, I want to attach a user policy to this. And Amazon does their best to try and simplify a very hairy process of granting permissions inside of here. Now, this is where we go far later, but they have some nice big templates. Or I can use my own policy generator and say, okay, I want to create, for this user, I want to grant them permissions to Amazon Glacier. And I say, okay, well, here's the kind of things I want them to be able to do. I want to be able to, well, no, not create and delete vaults, but maybe do a abort upload or complete an upload. You see where this goes, right? Everything can be controlled of what this user is able to do for that. Now I'm just going to say, have at it, Glacier user. Now it says, okay, yeah, they can do everything to what Amazon resource name. Well, wait a second, have I seen that before? Yes, I have. I'm gonna hang on. I'm gonna drop out of there and open another tab. Get me back to here. Remember when we went to Glacier and I said, okay, we generated our Volt, and just about the only thing that we saw was this ARN. It's asking for an ARN. Back here, it's asking for an ARN. So that's where we're able to put in what Volt they have access to. So what I'll do is grab this string right here. This is the ARN, the entire thing. Put it on my clipboard. Shoot back over here, and I'll say, okay, so they have all selected actions to this ARN. Add statement. And it comes in there and says, okay, now good. They've got those custom permissions. Continue. Okay. Now notice that this is where I said it gets hairy. This is where we get into some JSON code, and we get to see behind the scenes what AWS is generating to permit access to a resource. Now, when you become a ninja, which probably it might happen in this series, depends on where we go. But when you become a ninja, you will start editing these things by hand. You'll just be, like, let me just rattle one of these things. Maybe not completely by hand, but nonetheless, you've now created your first custom policies. I can apply that. So now this CBT user, okay, you following so far? I know some of you are like, what do you do? Let me just summarize. This CBT user, we created a user account with these access keys. What are those access keys? They're these guys right here that I copied to my clipboard or my little notepad. With those access keys, has permissions, because I just generated it, to access that resource in Glacier. Whew. Now you can see why I was so doing this. Now, okay, so we know that we can only interface with a Vault using the RESTful API. We know that IAM ties heavily into that because that's what defines the permissions that the RESTful API can use. Now, what's the missing piece? The missing piece is give me a program to put some stuff in there. I don't want to sit there from a code prompt and a command line on uploading my family pictures to this Vault. How is there a program to do it? Well, there are a lot of them. I'll say probably the most well-known, let me jump back here to a web browser, will be Cloudberry. Cloudberry Lab. I'm sure these guys get enough press just from being, they were one of the first to go there. So you can go to Amazon. You can I think the program is called Cloudberry Explorer. I want to say Cloudberry Explorer. Huh? I don't know. Free? Is it free? And let's just see. There we go. Look at that. So provides a user interface for Amazon S3 and Glacier accounts. So hey, I mean, you got a little free tool. I've actually not used this tool yet. Let me show you what I use. I'll just give you a demonstration. This is actually my Synology box, my little NAS at home. I love this little box, and I get so thrilled talking about it because it's like when you find something really cool and you just want to show a friend. That's kind of where I'm at with this. So this has it's like an iPhone or something. You can download plugins, right? So I download this little Glacier backup plugin, and it allows you. That's not good. I actually went in here before I recorded this and saw this. My clock, I forgot to set it using NTP, syncing the clock. So the clock ended up drifting way off on this. So it started failing. If you look at the log, it says, hey, the time is now earlier than what Amazon is saying. It's greater than, it's not letting you. You can't put timestamps. So my backups have been failing. So it's good that I did this because I would have never known. But so for instance, I can go in here and say I want to create a backup. Here's my wizard, and it walks me through and says, okay, what do you want to name it? I understand and all that. Now look at this. Oh, oh, this is where it comes together. I say, I am actually in the region Oregon, and I'm going to authenticate using, behind the scenes, it's the RESTful API, the REST API, using the access key and secret key that was assigned to my user account. So if I come in and dump these credentials at Oregon, it will say, oh, you're the CBT user. What permission? Oh, it's got permissions to that Glacier bucket. So I can go in there and say, okay, next, it's, testing it out. Let's make sure that it's not good. Right. So that would be an example of why did it fail? Testing connection failed. Hang on, let's look at the log. Let's see what's going on here. Testing connection failed. Let's do a little reload of our log. Starting to back up. I bet you, I've got a little backup. So once I found out that I wasn't backing up, before I did this recording, I've got a ways to go. 145 gigs to back up. So I was like, oh man, my wife's gonna be angry. So I went ahead and ran a picture backup right away. So it's probably failing because I've already got a backup running to actually it's to the same region under a totally different credential account. But do you get the idea? Once I go in there and say these are the credentials, then what am I even talking about? The NAS device, the Synology box, is going to come up and say, oh, okay, you're going to have access to that vault. Now go ahead and throw your credentials or throw your files. Choose what you want to back up, and I'll take care of that for you. So, compared to these guys, I'm just like, good grief, how do I even get into Glacier? But I hope that gave you enough of a view of how to interface with Glacier. And I went there, even though I didn't want to go fully into IAM and all the things that you can do with that. I went there because now your eyes have been opened just a tiny bit so that later on when we get into IAM, it's not going to be totally new. You're going to be like, oh, okay, so this was kind of what Jeremy went through back in the Glacier world. So let me wrap up. We have seen S3 stuff, EBS stuff, and Glacier stuff. I tried to kind of, again, cram as much as I could into here of working with these with enough information to get you started and kind of take away that mysterious, oh, how do I start here for each one of those. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.